I'm Rachel Daly, and I'm the Visual Arts Program Director at Artistry. Artistry is a multidiscipline nonprofit arts organization based in the Bloomington Center for the Arts. This past year, we partnered with the Minnesota Valley National Wildlife Refuge to rebrand, relaunch, and program their Confluence Gallery, which is located in the refuge's beautiful Bloomington Education and Visitor Center, which is in South Loop, Bloomington. I want to thank them for hosting this exhibit and this artist talk. This past winter, a call for artists was released and a curatorial review panel was created to review and select artists to exhibit in the Confluence Gallery. The panel was made up of community members, refuge staff, participating artists, and the panel selected Jodi to be the first featured artist in the newly rebranded gallery. While the exhibit is exclusively online because of COVID-19, we are pleased to be able to share Jodi's beautiful work through a number of ways, including this artist talk. To check out the exhibition catalog and a wonderful video tour of the exhibit, please visit artistrymn.org/Confluence Gallery. I'm going to let Jodi more fully introduce herself, but I do want to say that she is an accomplished, award-winning artist whose work has been exhibited nationally and in many private and corporate collections around the country. So please welcome Jodi Reeb.
Oh, thank you, Rachel. Thank you. Thank you so much. So I've been so excited to have my work on view. It's a body of work that I developed about 2 years ago. I received the Minnesota State Arts Board grant. And I've always been a photographer in my mind and in my heart, but using photographs as collage with my encaustic painting process, which is beeswax and molten beeswax using pigments as well. And I just want to make sure, can you see me better now? Or okay, good. So just for those of you that are familiar or not familiar with encaustic painting, it is an ancient medium. It's kind of making a recent resurgence in the last 30 to 40 years. And thanks to Jasper Johns, he's actually kind of single-handedly the one given credit for bringing it back to modern times. But the Greeks and the Romans used it to seal their ships because they were wooden ships and they had joints. And when they invaded the Egyptians are the ones that elevated it to be a painting medium and started using it for portraits of mummies. And so we have lots of examples of that at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. In fact, in New York, they have them on display because they were painted on wood and buried in the sand for 2,000 years, and miraculously they lasted. And so that was kind of the first foray into encaustic painting. And they basically use the same materials that we use today, except that they didn't have the modern machinery to modify the heat, and they used hot oil over coals. So I can't even imagine how that you'd need lots of assistance, I think, to make that happen and be workable. So, and I discovered encaustic painting myself about 12 years ago. And before that, I was a acrylic painter primarily, and I went to the Minneapolis College of Art and Design. I've been an artist full-time for 25 years, and I just feel so lucky. Minneapolis has been so good to me as far as just being such an arts city and art supporting city. So I'm really happy with being here. And then I also have been teaching for the last 12 years as well. So kind of pulling it all together, and obviously having an exhibition kind of is a great culmination of all that coming together. And I thank Rachel very much. You did a beautiful job curating the show and all the materials in this exhibition that is online. So we can post that again, maybe in the comments, the link to see the show if you'd like to see it at another time. But I'm going to go through my process today, just talking about how I was inspired and how I came to kind of create this body of work. So I'm going to share my screen now, hopefully. All right. Okay, everybody can see it, thumbs up. Okay, good. So, so I came up with the idea of botanical expressions with this exhibition, just because I was looking for images that I kind of resonated with in terms of the flowers. And my work is nature-based at times. Here's a little view of the gallery right now. My work is nature-based, and I have this big umbrella that I'm always kind of working with the imagery, but the photographs really allowed me to be more representational, whereas in the past I've done more abstract work. And that looks like abstracted landscapes, or I like to use seed shapes in my work, oftentimes like seed pod shapes. And I love this idea that seeds contain everything you need to grow a full plant. And even that the idea that leaves are like a little map just for the tree that they're on, just with the veins. And so I'm kind of always playing with this idea of this macro and this micro idea of exploring that kind of bigger picture idea with nature-based work. So these are some paintings at the gallery. That blue one in the middle measures 36 by 48 inches. And I've recently started working with a vintage Nikon camera and shooting film. I love to do everything very process oriented. So I could just do Photoshop, I suppose, but I just like the idea of taking photographs and then, remember how we all used to have that feeling of getting our film back. And I still like to do that. So that middle photograph was a photograph that I took with the camera, and I exposed the frame twice. So I took a photograph, and then I literally tricked the camera to thinking I had advanced the film, but I hadn't. And then I took another image over it. So it just kind of shows you how the trees in the background are a little bit fainter, and that's because I took those first. So I'm playing with that idea. And then the image next to it as well, I did do that as well. So it was kind of a snowy day with some oak leaves, and just playing with that idea again. So kind of the smaller idea going to the bigger idea, and always showing that landscape. So I'm just going to go to the next view here. And this is kind of a special exhibition space because it's got a curved wall, and it's like almost the paintings are marching down the wall, so to speak. So sometimes when I'm looking at the work and the photograph that I took, I'm just taking the photographs actually with my iPhone. And sometimes I don't even frame the image. I'll just kind of hold my camera in the foliage and just let it take a picture to see what I get. And some of the balances of the photographs are a little off, but it feels balanced in some way also. So I'm not completely planning my shots and just letting that whole process take over. But when I look at my photograph that I took, I will kind of ask my photograph, like, what do you need? Do you need some color? Do you need black and white? Do you need texture? Do you need it to be smooth? So in a way, I'm thinking about it that I'm collaborating with the photograph. So I'm going to show you the next view. And these are more the colored photographs. And so I'm achieving that coloring with oil pigment stick, which is basically an oil paint. And I'm just burnishing that into the wax surface. And it just gives it this very soft, kind of ethereal color. And I tend to kind of do a lot with the sky and the ground, just because it's kind of a natural setting. And when I take the photographs, I love to take them on a cloudy day. And that way the sky is very white, and it gives me that opportunity to colorize it versus doing a lot of Photoshop, which I am not. I am not. I'm still a painter, but even though I get to print some images. So let's look at one more view that's a little bit close up images. So these paintings measure 12 by 12 inches at the smallest, and then these two in the center are 24 by 24 inches. And I love to work in series. So oftentimes I'll work on 4 paintings at a time, 6 paintings at a time. And they, it's like a body of work, and they'll start to kind of have a dialogue with each other as well. And this is just another view. These are photographs taken by the lovely Rachel Daly when she installed the show. So I'm just going to go through my process.
I'm going to interrupt you. Sorry, Jodi, real quick. Someone is saying they can't hear you.
Okay.
Are we having, I can hear you okay. I don't know if we can have a show of hands if you can hear Jodi okay.
Or a thumbs up if you can hear me.
Or a thumbs up. Okay. Let's see.
So I am not muted, so I think I'm okay as far as my sound goes.
So this might be an issue with the person's own audio on their computer. I just wanted to double check to make sure
okay,
everyone else was okay. Thank you.
Sorry. I wish we could help with tech support, but that's always a little tricky with these, right? So in 2018, I received this grant, and I collaborated with the Minnesota Landscape Arboretum in Chaska, Minnesota. And I wanted to take photographs that weren't just another botanical photographer, because I wasn't trying to do that. I was trying to really find my voice as a photographer, and then ultimately use the images as collage for my paintings. But when I started taking photographs, I just had to get it out of the way to just take a couple bee photographs with these beautiful flowers. It's just kind of, I think you have to just kind of start with that, and then you can kind of go from there, right? And this is just the Tajian Bee Center. So it's a research center completely dedicated to the research of the pollinators and the bees in Minnesota, in that area. And it's a beautiful museum, and it's just really educational. And part of my grant was me researching. I kind of consider myself like a little mini scientist in a way. And just really to use this body of work to raise awareness about the challenges that pollinators face, such as loss of habitat, pesticides, water. And I can even tell you a few things that you can do in your own yard, and that is just even have a little bowl with water and rocks, so they have a place to drink water, to leave leaves in the fall in your yard, because a lot of the native bees, especially are solitary bees, and they just burrow into leaf areas and open ground, versus the bees, the pollinator honeybees are hive dwellers. So obviously they kind of work together, but the solitary bees are even harder to see the challenges they face because they're all alone. So, so it's just kind of interesting that there's two factions, with the honeybees as one, and we're more familiar with them, but the native bees, there's actually 410 species in Minnesota. So it's just crazy. And they vary in size and color. They can be green, they can be as small as an ant, all the way up to the bumblebee, which is the largest one. So all this research is very interesting. So these are the hives. So these are all honeybees. And I showed up at the Arboretum one day in my heels and a dress, and they said, Jodi, do you want to go outside and go, hang out with the bees? And so of course I said yes, but I wish I would have taken a photograph of me, because I'm in my my bee outfit with high heels on, and I'm sinking into the grass and everything. So anyway, this was one of the hives, and I actually am a little scared of bees, so this is also kind of a personal challenge for me. But Ping Hanze is the naturalist there, and she helped me. And this is her opening up the case, and you could just still hear the soft hum of the bees. It's just like this magical moment, just this soft hum, because they're just so happy in their little homes, and you can listen to that. So this is her showing us the bees, and she does use smoke. You can't really see the smoke, but she does use that to help with the bees, to calm them down. And there, I've got it noted, there's 410 bee species. And I also like to note that they all have different mouth parts. So I kind of assume that bees could pollinate any plant they wanted to, but it's actually not true, because each plant and flower has a different opening. And so the bees actually modify their mandibles to pollinate different plants. And honeybees especially put the honey and pollen on their feet and their legs. And so that's how they carry it. And some of them carry it in their mouths. And so it's just kind of interesting how they're all kind of adapting to these different ways. And this, you can see the honeycomb is filled with honey. And there's me kind of smiling tentatively, because I still am a little nervous, but anyway, so that was me holding one of the drawers. And then these are where the eggs are. So they'll use one side for the food, which is the honey, and then the other side, they'll do egg sacs. So you can see the white, those are the eggs inside the little openings. And then they've covered them over with wax for protection once they have the eggs laid in that area. So I thought that was really fascinating too, because I didn't realize that they use it as a home to actually, put their eggs in too, but they keep it separate. They keep the food and the baby separate. So this garden is filled with all sorts of different plants that are pollinator friendly, and you can go there and make notes. Bachman's has a really great section, and they're very knowledgeable about what kind of plants you can plant in your own garden to attract bees and pollinators. Even moths and hummingbirds are also pollinators, so I like to mention them too, because we're so used to just the bees. But those are also other ones. This one I caught a bee, which I was really happy to. This is one of the green bees, and it is about the size of a fly. I actually thought it was a fly, but it's not. So it's just kind of fun to see. You might even be seeing different kinds of native bees that you didn't even realize, but they are native bees and not the yellow honeybees that we're used to. Oh yeah, dragonflies, you can't forget those too. So I had my little phase of taking all these different photographs of the pollinators. And even hornets and wasps, I know we don't really, or maybe don't want them building nests in our house, but they also are pollinators. So I kind of remind people to be gentle with them as well. So, so as part of my taking the photographs, I really wanted to have this unique perspective on the flowers. And so I came up with this idea and called this body of work a different view. So I kind of was even thinking about how is it for the bees and how are they getting to, getting close-ups of the flowers that they're pollinating. So that was my inspiration for all the photographs that I took after that. So I'm going to lead you through. So this was the first photograph that I took with my iPhone, literally just holding it down into the plants, and it actually slipped out of my hand a little bit. And so I got this motion. And when I looked at my camera, I thought, aha, this is it. You know what I mean? I wanted to do some kind of close up and have just that different view versus just being just a pretty photograph. So then I had to modify this. I thought, if I'm going to use this for collage, how do I change this so that I can use it in a painting? And the first thing I did was just to lighten the image and take away the color. So that's what I did. And I really got this abstract looking form, and I loved it. I just loved that it felt very organic, but at the same time, you could tell it was still a plant. And this is the finished painting. So this is my very first painting in the series that I made, and it's called From Below. And because I literally took the photograph from below, and that you can see the oil pigment stick in the sky, and it's just this really soft feeling photograph. And the beeswax is mixed together with damar resin, and that elevates it to be an art material. So I'm not painting with just pure beeswax by itself. I'm sometimes adding pigment to it, or the damar resin, which elevates the melting temperature. So it melts between 160 to 220 degrees, and that makes it very durable art form. So just like acrylic or oil painting, it's as durable as those mediums. So we're going to just keep going through here. So this is another photograph I took, and I was trying to keep track of all the names of the flowers, but they were in Latin. So, if you ask me what they are, I don't know. But this one was clover. It was very close to clover. So the clovers were very small in size, and I love making things larger. So this painting ended up being 18 by 24 inches. And then you can see how I made it black and white. And then this is the finished piece. So I built up a lot of layers of texture, and I do like that it gets a little blurry, transformed with the beeswax. And using these pollinator-friendly plants and then having my medium from the bees just for me was very full circle. So, and then I could use it as a way to raise awareness for the bees. So it was just a very fulfilling project, kind of social impact as well. Whereas not just another pretty picture, so to speak. And here's another one. I think this is Queen's End lace. So actually I said now I don't know the names, but I do know some of them. And then again, just this one building up a lot of white into it, kind of some green. And so I'm painting color and then beeswax and then color, and then I'm adding the tissue paper. So I'm printing these all on tissue paper, running them through my printer on a carrier sheet so that it's very stiff and strong. And that tissue paper sort of disappears once it gets involved with the wax and almost just floats into the wax. And so that's really the effect that I was after. And I learned this technique from an artist in Minneapolis named Claire O'Neill. So she does totally different subject matter, and it's interesting how you can get obviously totally different effects. So this is another one. This was a hosta that was a plant, and I ended up making a painting with this that was 36 by 48 inches. So it was the largest one that I had made of this at this size. And the way that I was able to work large was I was tiling the images. So I printed this image in 8 pieces ranging at the size of 12 inches wide by 18 inches tall. And the tissue paper is so thin that I had to butt it up against each other. And then I was able to create this larger piece. So, so it's really freeing. So I could really work as large as 48 by 60 even, or even larger than that too. But it just allows me that flexibility working with photographs to really work large. And I loved just the light. I don't know, like just looking under plants. I know we don't do it like this, but the light just was always very beautiful. And I was always kind of inspired just by seeing how that was coming together. So, and this one, this is a 24 by 24 inch painting. And this one, I just did black and white. So again, just kind of talking about how, you know, I'd let the painting sort of have its own voice, or the photograph. And then this one I just felt needed to be black and white. So there's me in my studio. I have my studio at Traffic Zone Center for Visual Arts in the North Loop area of Minneapolis. And I just thought I would, you know, show my little face on my presentation here. And this is another one. So I've got a printmaking background, and I love to use screen printing or different printmaking practices in my work as well. So these, if you can see that honeycomb shape, I created that using cardboard. So just recycled materials. And if you peel that paper away, if you've ever had that cardboard that's kind of stacked and it's got that honeycomb in the inside, I peeled off the top layer, and then I printed that. I put black paint on it and I printed that. Course process, here we go. And then I changed that into a screen print. So just wanting to have that pollinator honeycomb texture within some of my paintings, but I actually created it with cardboard. So always looking for recycled materials and ways to kind of substantiate my imagery, but not always, you know, hit you over the head with the actual thing. I didn't know how else to get the honeycomb inked up either, to show that as part of the process. So I'm just going to go through now and show you some paintings that I've created using this method. Different sizes. So this is 18 by 18. And sometimes I'll even do some underpainting under the tissue, and that's kind of what's showing through on this one. But you can do layers. So when you work with wax, you're really thinking about layers, and you need to fuse each layer. So when you're done, and fusing it is using a heat gun. And the heat gun melts all the layers together. So when you're done, you basically have one painting that is one layer. And I like to describe it when you work with acrylic paint, you work with acrylic and it bonds to each other because it's plastic. And same with oil, the oil paint has oil, but the beeswax needs heat to actually physically melt together. So it is like a science project in of itself. It's either molten or it's a solid. So it's kind of a magical medium to use for that reason also. And this painting was 24 by 24. And the titles, they kind of come to me in the moment when I'm making the painting, or I have to like really think about it. So this one, I just remembered taking the photograph, and literally it was a really breezy day. And so I just kind of used that as inspiration for the title. And this one is 18 by 18, but I had a little bit of a breakthrough because if you can see, there's some kind of black shadowing happening in this one. And I originally used a photograph that I could put it on my painting, but then I wasn't that happy with how it turned out. And so I ended up just burying it under the wax. And I love that it gave this kind of shadowing effect. And then I thought, oh, I can even layer all the tissue paper together. So it started this whole other idea of how to build image, that it wasn't always just the one painting or the one photograph being the image, that I could, you know, build layers up of other images behind it. So I felt like that created some really nice depth, even though it was a mistake. I love having discoveries like that. And then I started with that idea. Then I went to actually creating completely elaborate paintings underneath my tissue paper. And this has a full landscape that is behind this whole painting. So you can kind of see the sky, a little of the blue. And the landscape itself was inspired by a marsh in Minneapolis. So I've got different colors there, and you can see it's coming through the tissue paper. But I basically painted this whole painting underneath just to cover it up. So, but I think it's worth it, right? You can see some of the colors coming through. And this is another little one. I love working in little series, like especially 12 by 12s, like a block of 9 or 12 is just fun to just really show a bunch of different ideas at once as one larger painting. And whoops, sorry about that, make you all dizzy. In the distance, this one, I really wanted the sky to really just lead you through that, because using these I don't even, I think they're gladiolas, but I'm not completely sure, but just really exercising that depth. And I think really this was successful in just having that paint create the depth with the photograph that was very close up with the foreground. And here's one more of the reflections. And this one, I thought I wanted to do a sunset or a sunrise. And honestly, I thought it looked like maybe it was a forest fire because of all the orange and the yellow. So I ended up bringing it back to blue and just having some of the orange and the yellow in the background. But when you work with wax, you can just get all these colors because you can work very opaque or you can work very translucent because the beeswax is very translucent. And so this one has about 20 layers on it. It got really, really thick. So I love working with that. And then I sort of subdued that middle flower because I wanted the one on the right to really pop and be the focal point. But this is a good example of how I was just putting my phone in kind of the flowers and taking a shot. And it's not as framed as I might frame it, but I feel like it still is balanced somehow. So this one I called Splash of Color because there's just so many colors in it. And these flowers were just so tiny. It was really fun to blow these up. So 12 by 12 inches on this, but the flower itself is probably 3 inches tall. So I'm kind of always playing with scale with this. And working with series, I thought, why don't I just break one picture into a series of 3? And so that's what I did with this one. And you know, not every image I think is successful to do it this way, but this one kind of just, I feel like the vines, they kind of meander through the whole paintings and just lead you through it. So that's where the title came from with this one called Interconnection as well. And this one has some pink in there, which I was thinking about the sunrise because I would go to the Arboretum different times of the day, depending on you know, the clouds especially. And I found that the morning was really the best when the sun was kind of low in the sky. And then also on a cloudy day, if it didn't make it at all, then it was even better. But so I'm kind of always thinking about the moment that I took the photograph and sort of emulating that with the paintings as I'm painting it. And this one I call Propensity just because it was kind of curving over. And you can see the Tajian center in the background. There's a little roof line and that's part of the center. So that was my homage to it. And we're getting toward the end here. And this one, again, really a lot of encaustic paint on it, but you can see the texture that starts to build up over time because a lot of times when I'm painting, the brush will cool off with the wax on it. And then it starts to bump along the surface and just hit the high spots and almost create little mountains on the painting. And it's just beautiful. And I can fuse that, heating it up, but not so that I lose my texture. So you can work very smooth with this or very textural. And so kind of using that texture in the middle of the painting to create that focal point. And this is another larger painting, 36 by 48. And this one sort of always moves me because I just have this fond memory when I was a little girl. I was like 5 years old and I was laying in the grass on my belly, just looking at flowers really close up. And it sort of gives me the sense of that painting and that time again, because again, these are very small flowers, but 36 by 48. So it really will envelop you as a person, a bigger person now. And I liked that. It just kind of, when you look at it, it kind of just brings me back a little bit to that time when I was laying in the grass as a little girl, looking at the flowers. Oops, I went a little fast there. And this was Gathering. I just kind of thought that this is sort of a flower party in a way, having a nice time there. But again, you know, having that the way I framed it, that other little flowers going off to the side. But I just like that that's in the background. So not framing a photograph, I feel is a nice way for me to work because I do like to have found images in a way where I don't have all the say in how I make an image, and it's fun just to kind of look through the camera and just see which photographs I'm drawn to make a painting from. And this one is Overflow. I had that cone flower going off the side, and this one again I kept black and white. So yeah, so that kind of concludes my my presentation as far as that goes. But I always like to give the Minnesota State Arts Board credit because they give a lot of funding to artists, and I think we're all the better for it. So thank you. Thank you, Minnesota State Arts Board. All right, so we'll kind of go back to the view now. And this would be a good time if you had any questions or anything like that. I'm happy to talk to you about that. If you had anything specific, we could do that. Just spend a couple of minutes. So if you want to unmute yourself, I think that would be okay if you had a question.
And Jodi, I think we had some written in the chat first. If that's okay, I'll read those to you.
Okay, sure, that sounds good.
Just gonna scroll back for a little bit. Did you move to encaustic work because it is more eco-friendly than using acrylic paints? That's a question from Laura.
Yeah, that was a really good question. There's definitely a factor for me because acrylic, I do love working with acrylic, but there is something about it. It is plastic, right? Like after all, and the beeswax also, I call it, has a voice to it because it's something to deal with. It's not where you're painting and just painting and making a mark and painting a mark. The beeswax is something you can carve into, you can heat, you can melt, you can shape, you can scrape it off. So it's really this dimensional sculptural medium that really captivated me in terms of all the possibilities. And it took me almost 2 years to figure out how I wanted to work with it because there's so many techniques you can work with. So that was part of it, but definitely with acrylic. And I do still love acrylic, but there's nothing like beeswax. The smell of it, it's just the whole thing. Just, I love supporting and using it as kind of a vehicle to raise awareness for the pollinators too. So that's a great question.
Great. And then also, are these paintings on canvas or board? I think we might have seen one of them as you were holding it in your studio, but yeah, maybe talk about your substrate.
Yes, that's a great question. So I didn't talk about that. So substrates, you always want to use something that's absorbent and rigid and durable because you are working with heat. So you want something that's going to be able to take the heat. And canvas, you can paint on canvas, but it's not recommended as much because if you touch the back, the wax could maybe crack or pop off. So I work on birch panels, and it's a company called Ampersand Art Supply, and they do different surfaces for acrylic, watercolor, pastel, and they kind of gear their surface toward what you're working with. And they also have one for encaustic paint. And that's primarily what I use. And that way I can have a piece I can frame it or not. And I know it's gonna last, especially while I'm selling my work. I want something that my customers or patrons are gonna feel good about, that it's gonna be a very stable, durable painting. And I think the wood just kind of works well with the subject matter too. I like the wood sides, and I usually will stain those as part of the framing process.
Great. The final written question, at least for now, is do you ever use the cold wax technique?
That's such a great question. So cold wax, for those of you that don't know, is beeswax, but it has solvent in it. And so it has the consistency of Crisco. I think that's the best maybe some of us don't know what Crisco is, but but Crisco, and it's really an oil painting medium addition. And it kind of, makes oil paint thicker. But because it's beeswax made, then, it's kind of in that beeswax family, but it's not something you heat up. And I do like it a lot, but at the end of the day, it's still oil paint and it takes a long time to oxidize or dry. So when I do work with it, I will put sand or even marble dust into it to make it like less viscous or oily. And I do love the effect of it because you can also carve into it too. And it's completely different from beeswax where I'm heating it up and melting it. But it definitely has its properties. And I like again, adding that marble dust to it just to give it some kind of thickness to it. So yes, that's kind of gaining some momentum too, I think, with just encaustic in general, or like that beeswax process is getting more popular these days.
Great. So if you would like to ask a question, you can unmute yourself, or you can still type in the chat if you're more comfortable with that. But are there any other questions for Jodi?
Hi, I'm Twyla. I have a question about, you said that you print your photos on tissue paper.
Yeah.
How does a printer take tissue paper?
Okay, I thought I might get the question. I'll be right back. I'm going to get an example.
Okay.
as an example right here. This is why I'm doing this for my studio, because I am a teacher after all, so I always like to be prepared. So this is one of my images that I printed, and I printed this, I taped it on 3 sides. I guess I grabbed a big one. I have a big printer here. So I put masking tape on 3 sides of my paper, and I'm attaching the tissue paper to basically what is like a piece of copy paper. And then I'm able to run this through the printer because it's got, it's got some heft to it. And I don't have to do all the sides, but then I'll cut this off of the backing paper, and then I can use this tissue as collage in my painting. So that's a great question. And this is just one segment of one of my paintings. You can see how abstract it gets. And I'll do like 8 of these or 6, depending on what size the painting I'm working with, and then kind of tile these together, put them together like a puzzle. So if you have more questions about that too, maybe Rachel, would you put my email in there? And if anybody's interested, you could email me, and then I can, address your question specifically if you're interested in doing this yourself. I also have some videos that I recorded last summer, right after COVID hit. I just jumped into online teaching. Didn't know what I was doing, but here we are, right? And so I've actually recorded those, and those are available for any artists that are watching today, that you could kind of lead you through the whole process of how I use this tissue paper in my paintings. So
Thank you.
yes. Anybody else have a question about anything? I think I want to mention too, you need to use natural bristle brushes because of the heat. So those are some things, and you can use oil paints with the paints too. You can use your own, you can make your own paints using encaustic paint medium and then adding oil paint to it. So it's not compatible with acrylic because again, that's not absorbent, but it is completely compatible with oil paint. So, and oil pastels and things like that.
I guess I do have another question. In your journey, have you, to using oils, have you used watercolors?
Yes. Yes. So you, in combination with encaustic painting. So as an artist, I've done just watercolors by themselves, but you can also use them with encaustic if you paint that on the lower, the substrate or the painting surface. You can do a very beautiful watercolor painting first and let that dry completely. And then you can add encaustic paint over that. So I do that sometimes if I paint on paper too. You can paint a watercolor on the nice watercolor paper, and then I would glue that to my my board, my birch paneled board, and then use that as a good layer to start with the encaustic painting over that. So I'm kind of a jack of all trades. I have enough. I have a printmaking degree, and so I started out with encaustic, acrylic painting, and so I'm kind of constantly all using those things, and I feel that once you have that skill, it's just kind of fun to kind of, bring it back into it sometimes where it's appropriate. But watercolor it's probably the most challenging medium I've ever worked with, honestly, but I also still love it too. It's nothing like that washing is. Yeah, thank you, Twyla.
Yep, thanks.
So Jodi, we've got a couple written questions. Can you use pigments with the beeswax?
Yes. So powdered pigments you can add to the paints. You're going to have more of a translucent paint versus an opaque paint, but you can add that. I would stay away from powdered pigments that are plastic, but I would do a lot of art supply stores sell mineral pigments, and you can add those and make those too. It's really fun to just, you kind of can be like you're in the 18th century making your own paints like Van Gogh did, right? Kind of like that. So you can really customize it very much. And then a lot of the paints are also available commercially by R&F Handmade Paints, and they make beautiful paints too. Let me show you what that looks like. I should have had this all over here, but so this is kind of like a tube of paint, so to speak, and it's just it's a slab of wax that has the beeswax and the resin and the pigment in it. And the colors all come just like light fast, just like any colors that are available in oil or in watercolors or acrylics. So this is, I heat this up, I take the plastic off and heat this up, and then that, once it's molten, then I'm able to use it in my painting process.
I do have to endorse that video that Jodi just mentioned about her process, which I'm sure you can see on her website. I know it's been posted recently on
Oh,
Facebook.
on YouTube. You mean my,
On YouTube.
my new
On
promo
YouTube.
video?
There you go. We'll also get it on Artistry's on the Confluence Gallery website as well. We'll get that on early next week. But that I do recommend that because she is actually demonstrating how she's putting the pigment into the beeswax. So it's fascinating.
Right. Yes.
There's also a question about, will you provide information about how to take your classes, Jodi?
Yes. You can just jodireeb.com, just my name, JODIREEB.com. And I am teaching once a month in my studio, socially distanced. So I was teaching 5 artists at a time, but now I'm down to 3, and everybody's very spread out and very safe. I've got good ventilation and wearing masks. So on there, I do list my encaustic workshops that are local, but I'm also teaching one in Anchorage, Alaska. If anybody wants to join me in Anchorage, Alaska, or Grand Marais Art Colony in Grand Marais, Minnesota, I'm teaching there. And then there is something called the Encaustic Conference that's happening in the first weekend in June. It's virtual this year, but there's lots of amazing techniques that you can find about that. And so that's all under my Encaustic Workshops section of my website. You can check that out, as well as some pre-recorded videos from things that I've done too. So got to get with the times, you know, like I didn't do any of this before last March, but here we are, right? Making it all available in lots of different ways. So, and it's been really a blessing. Like that first meeting I had in May when I taught, I had 50 artists sign up with me. I think everybody was really hungry for, you know, workshops and connecting, and I got so moved at first because all of a sudden I had artists that were from Sweden and Russia and Canada and all over, and it just like that. This is kind of amazing, almost just to be able to connect like that, which I would never have done before. So I do try to find the silver lining in this whole situation we find ourselves in right
Absolutely. Now. Absolutely. A follow-up question to the pigments. How do you heat them up in your beeswax?
Wow, that's a good question too. So I use, I'm just going to show you because I have this right here handy. So this is a heated palette. It's, you know, like the ones that you make Thanksgiving breakfast on and you store the rest of the year. So it's just a heated palette, just like that, a tabletop griddle. So that's where I heat my paints on. And then once I get the paints on my painting, I use a heat gun like this, or oftentimes I'll even use a torch, which is really fun. So this, when I work really large, I'll use a propane torch like this. And this allows me to fuse the painting. And this one also makes it very smooth. And then this, it's like, it's good to have different tools for different things. This has a high setting and a low setting. And the low setting allows for texture because I can still fuse it, meaning melt it, but it won't melt it completely flat. And then the high setting does allow that to be flat. So irons work well too. So anything that gets, you know, to 200 degrees will work for the process of heating up the paints. So that was a great question too. And then it cools within about 10 seconds. It'll still be warm, but it becomes solid again about after 10 to 15 seconds. And then you're able to keep layering up and painting on it, versus acrylic painting would take a long time or overnight to dry. You can just really keep building and building and building with that. So it's a great question too.
And then are these paintings available for purchase?
Yes, they are. They are. So on my website also, just under jodireeb.com, I have an available art section. And so you can contact me if you're interested in a painting, or you can just buy right there on the PayPal.
And the exhibition catalog for the Confluence Gallery show, those pieces are also available right through PayPal as well, through the exhibition catalog or through Artistry.
Yes, yes, yes. Yes, I was thinking about that too, because I thought we definitely want to showcase both of those things, both opportunities, I guess.
Okay, another question. Is it possible to add too many layers, or can you keep adding layers indefinitely?
I don't think so. I mean, it's really forgiving in that if you feel like you did add too many, you can always scrape it down and take some off. But for me, I even have some artist friends that build up a layer of 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch. You can really get some kind of amazing effects by scraping back into things. But there's really no right or wrong answer as far as that goes. It's really kind of what the painting needs or what you're trying to achieve with the surface, whether it's textural or smooth. So, but I usually just keep going. I always think more is more. That's a great question though. It's also like, when is it done? I don't know. But when I'm teaching, I like to give students feedback about their work and kind of keep pushing that. But I consider, like, when a painting is done, I always get this question. So I kind of think it's like you push it too far and then you kind of make it come back, and then you kind of push it too far and you make it come back. And pretty soon you're at that level of 100%, right? Like when the painting's done, versus when you're at 90 and you go 91, 92, when you're just trying to do these little pieces to kind of finish this painting. I think it's worth it to push it too far and then bring it back, and then, you know, kind of go back and forth a little bit more. So just my philosophy, but we've all done that, I think, right? When you're just trying to get it done and have a little extra, couple more brush strokes to make something work, or whether it's sewing or whatever it is, right? Just kind of get it done.
Sounds like a fine line though.
It always is.
Yeah.
The age-old question, when is it done? I don't know.
Okay. Are there any final questions?
I see Sarah says something very interesting technique in tying with pollinators. So, oh, well, how fun. You were just at the Arboretum. Was that appropriate? I think that's really wonderful. So I love that place. If you haven't been, if you're local in Minneapolis, that is a nice place to visit.
And in Bloomington, the Wildlife Refuge really is a fantastic place to take a stroll through as well. So if you don't want to head all the way out to the Arboretum, which can be a bit of a trek for some of us, right in Bloomington in the South Loop area, which is just east of the Mall of America, is a really fascinating and wonderful gem right there on the Minnesota River. So check that out as well.
It's like the wetlands are amazing. The wetlands, there's nothing like it, really. I mean, all the birds and everything like that you can see. Yes. All right. Anything else for me? You can always send me a message. Okay, so Laura's saying the whole technique, I've recently made my pigments from pounding pebbles. Oh, you can absolutely do that. I've done that too. Because there's these yellow pigments, like especially in Lake Superior, I found, and they kind of are chalky. You can grind those and add those to your pigments as well. So that's really cool. I think that's really empowering when you can make your own art supplies, especially. That's really great. We could do a little follow-up video of everyone's inspiration after this.
Well, we have hit that magical point.
I think so.
Yeah, so thank you all so much. Thank you, Jodi, for really allowing us to explore a little deeper into your art and your process. It really is a fascinating one. And I do highly recommend the demonstration video that is posted on YouTube, but also we'll get that on artistrymn.org/Confluence Gallery. So thanks everyone for joining us today. Enjoy the rest of the weekend. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And I want to say, Carol, thank you for joining me from Mexico, or even La Breña. Mwah, mwah, mwah.
and someone from Hawaii too.
Oh, thank you for being here. And Carla too, and Rita, some of my students. So thank you. And Jodi with the Y. Thank you. Yes, thank you for everyone. I really, really appreciate you being here today. It was really fun to share my process with you. So, and Rachel, very good, very good. Thank you.
No, my pleasure, my pleasure. Thanks, Jodi.
Okay. Well, everyone have a great weekend, and I'll see you soon, I hope.
Take care.